The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
The theme for this episode of Farm Connections is creatures great and small. We'll start with the small. Two university researchers join me in the studio for a conversation about bacteria, the good, the bad, and the ugly, when it comes to food production. Then we'll go larger as we look at life on the farm through the eyes of a barn cat. And we'll meet the next FFA Student Leader of the Week. It's coming right now on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
What do you think of when you hear the word bacteria? Illness? Disease? Danger? Today you're going to get a different view. I visited with Dr. Dan O'Sullivan and Dr. Lloyd Metzger, two researchers involved in the field of biotics, the functions of bacteria in food production. I learned that bacteria is for the most part a good thing, critical to natural biological functions, useful for food producers to increase yield, and instrumental in the creation of new ag products. Let's listen in. Guys, when I was young, everybody said, wash your hands, get bacteria away from you. Is that good advice? Is bacteria all bad?
Well, first of all, it's good advice to wash your hands. Listen to our moms. When she says to wash your hands, we still need to do that. But we've got to this point where we've been so educated to keep everything clean and to get rid of all bacteria that we forget that there's actually good bacteria out there. Those good bacteria are called probiotic bacteria, and we actually want those bacteria. We actually want to consume products that have those bacteria in. So it really is a change of mindset compared to what we've been taught for so long.
Dan, do you agree with that?
Well, yes, of course. Well, what we got to realize, a lot of people forget, is that humans evolved around bacteria. They're part of the world, they're part of our body. There's more bacteria inside every person than there is their own cells in their own body. It's not even a close count. Some make it like 10 to 1. So those bacteria actually have a role. And one role that we are beginning to appreciate more and more is developing the immune system. Now, we are inundated with people with allergies, with colitis, with Crohn's disease. These are all basically malfunctioning immune systems in people. And we see this at a very high incidence in the developed world, whereas if you look at the developing world, where there's a lot more dirt and things that people are exposed to, they're very low incidence. So we now know that essentially the advice that the doctors gave us when we bring home our babies, i.e. keep them as clean as possible in a sterile bubble, that's not the best advice. They essentially need to be introduced into the normal commensal bacteria because that essentially stimulates the immune system into working properly. So,
and that's where it gets difficult because we've got two messages here. Stay as clean as possible, but we need routine exposure to bacteria that we're going to be exposed to the rest of our life, and we have to build up a tolerance for them. But at the same time, we want to be rational and stay as clean as we possibly can and try to not get exposed to bad bacteria. So it's a tough situation because it's two things that are headbutting against each other, and the right answer is somewhere in between. We want to protect our children as much as we can from bad bacteria. At the same time, we want to routinely expose them to the environment they're going to be in, and also get them to consume good bacteria on a regular basis so they colonize our colon. I want you to talk a little bit about that, Dan, and how important it is to routinely consume probiotic bacteria.
Exactly. Well, we now have quite a bit of knowledge. We will not say that we know everything about the bacteria in our gut. We know there are thousands of them there, but we know something about some of them. And we know some bacteria, if they build up in high numbers like Clostridia, E. coli, Salmonella, these things that people hear about, that's a bad picture when that happens, yeah. But we know some bacteria, particularly lactobacilli in our small intestine, and what we call bifidobacteria in our large intestine. They essentially are what we know as the good generals of the bacteria. So if That's why if you look at a lot of yogurts, for example, you will see some of them saying contain acidophilus, which is a lactobacillus, or bifidus, or something to that nature, which means a bifidobacteria. And they're specifically there because boosting those bacteria in your gut is beneficial.
Yeah,
that much we do know.
There's multiple reasons why they're beneficial. First of all, we want the good bacteria to outcompete the bad bacteria. So those good bacteria, we want them to colonize in our small and large intestine, and when they're there, they can outcompete the bad bacteria and keep the bad bacteria from growing to high numbers and making us sick. Exactly. There's other things they can do. They can help with our immune response and fight inflammation. They can protect our intestinal lining and help us to absorb nutrients properly. So they can have a lot of different roles in our health status.
Exactly. It's interesting that here in the US, people are only beginning to realize this good bacteria concept. Whereas if you look at it, it's been over 100 years since this essentially was established. At the Institut Pasteur at the 1900s, basically that's like 110 plus years ago.
Bacteria.
There's
kill the bad ones.
Yeah, a pediatrician there by the name of Henri Tizier. He essentially specialized in infantile diarrhea. And what he noticed at this early stage was healthy breastfed infants had very unique bacteria that he could see in the microscope. He called them bifid shaped. That's where the bifidobacteria name comes today. Whereas if you look at diarrhea, they don't have these. And he essentially first put one and one together and came up with two and said, these bacteria must be keeping them healthy. And he was the first person to essentially feed those bacteria to children with diarrhea such that to promote a healthy flora. So it's a concept that's been around for over 100 years. Asia started marketing a product in 1938, one of the first commercial dairy products containing a specific bacteria to boost the immune system, and that's Yakult.
And that gets us to an interesting point. I think it's fairly easy to make the argument that we have good and bad bacteria, and we want the good bacteria to be maximized because we want to stay healthy. Yeah, we want the good bacteria to win. It just makes sense. So the question is, how often should we be consuming these good bacteria, and what foods should we eat with these good bacteria to make sure they get to where they're supposed to be in our colon and grow and outcompete the bad bacteria, and we have that health benefit? So it boils down to what is the right bacteria to consume, what product should we be consuming it in so it actually gets into our system and grow.
And what's the answer?
Well, milk and milk products are a wonderful part of that. That's the great news, is that not only do we get the calcium and phosphorus and protein, vitamin D, all those things from milk. In fact, they actually function to help get our good probiotic bacteria to survive digestion. We have strong acid in our stomach that is designed to kill bacteria to protect us. Milk products, especially fermented milk products, can help to protect the bacteria and get them to survive our stomach and get into our small intestine.
So Lloyd, it's a carrier, it's a feeder to the good bacteria and a buffer?
Yep, exactly. So the other thing I should mention is a concept you'll hear called prebiotics, which can confuse people. What's the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic? A probiotic is the actual bacteria. A prebiotic is a compound that the probiotic used to grow and establish themselves. So we like to have prebiotics that are fed with probiotics because they're a compound that our probiotic is now going to use to grow and outcompete our bad bacteria. Because remember, again, it's a battle, and we want our good bacteria at high numbers, and we want our bad bacteria to die off and not survive, so we stay healthy.
Well, just to reinforce it, it's important to realize as well, a prebiotic is 0 calories because our bodies can't utilize them either because they're long sugars, like 6 or 7 sugars attached together, and so only certain bacteria can actually utilize them. And some of the bacteria that can, we know, are these probiotics. So you're giving them specific food, as it were, and so it's nice. You're eating food and you're getting no calories.
Okay, doctors. You mentioned milk. One trend we hear a lot about is raw milk. Would this help or hurt your argument about beating up on the bad bacteria?
Okay, so this is a sticky question because there are people that believe raw milk is the key to future health. If you read the internet, you'll live forever if you start drinking raw milk. That's not right. Raw milk is dangerous. We have definite diseases that are linked to raw milk, and you will get those sicknesses if you consume raw milk.
Such as?
such as Campylobacter tuberculosis is probably the worst one.
Yeah, tuberculosis and brucellosis. If you,
Salmonella, E. coli, all of them.
Yeah, if you look at pre-mass pasteurization of milk, one of the more common ways that people got TB was from drinking milk. And a lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
some people don't get sick from raw milk.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay, so some people do not get sick from raw milk. And myself personally, I consumed raw milk as a child because I grew up on a dairy farm. So how can I advocate that the general population should not be consuming raw milk?
Good question.
How can you say that? Well, the fact is, I was routinely exposed to those bacteria because I worked on the farm. Now, farmers do a great job of processing very clean milk. They're trained, and their milkers are trained. We got to wash the cow before we start. We sanitize the cow before we start. We collect the milk as clean as we possibly can and get it into a bulk tank and cool it as fast as we can. Believe it or not, though, cows are not potty trained, right? And they're very difficult to potty train.
Right.
So as clean as we are at a farm, those bad bacteria are going to be part of the routine environment. Just inherently, that's what's going to happen. So people that work at the farm on a very routine basis are exposed to those bacteria, and they get sick, and then they get over it and build up a resistance to it. So if you're living in suburbia, you've not seen this farm and you've not seen this bacteria. If you consume raw milk, you have no resistance to those organisms you're going to see, and you're going to get sick. And in fact, a farmer that consumed raw milk at his farm would probably be fine because they're routinely exposed to that. Sure. If that farmer went to another farmer and consumed their raw milk, they would most likely get sick because they hadn't been exposed to those particular strains or different varieties. So it's only safe to consume raw milk if you routinely work on a farm and are routinely involved in cow management and cow care. Then I've got no problem with you drinking raw milk, as long as you're above a certain age too. Even if you grew up on a farm and born on a farm, if you're under 5 or 6 years of age, you should not be drinking raw milk. My mother pasteurized the milk that I consumed as a child until I got to a certain age.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Dan.
What is, except for a disease situation, like raw milk from a healthy cow is fine. But if raw milk from a cow that has a disease like TB or brucellosis, that gets into the milk. And that's the variable that you're rolling the dice with.
Well, doctors, you've defined why we need good bacteria, and we need to win the war between good and bad in the intestine, the body, inside and outside. Now, the consumer's in the grocery store.
And confused.
And yeah, they're looking at the labels, they're confused, and we've got companies that are advertising, and of course they think they're right or want the consumer with the dollars or the pesos or the mark, whatever exchange, they want them to buy.
The company's going to love this because we're going to argue that you need to consume these probiotics on an almost daily basis. So they would love you to select their product, and they're a locked-in consumer forever now. They got to eat your yogurt or your product every day. So really it boils down to now, what is the right strains of bacteria? How do we make sure that they actually produce a health benefit and are safe? And do they actually survive in the product that we've put them in? And that's where we do a lot of research through the Midwest Dairy Foods Research Center. Our role is to work with the industry and work with the dairy farmers. They're partially funding our research program, and make sure that we do determine what strains are the most important, what strains should be in the product, do they survive in the product, do they actually get to the colon and colonize, and do they win the war against bad bacteria? And that's a lot of the research that Dan does.
That's right. And for the consumer, there's two avenues that a consumer can do. One is they get them probiotics through foods, or they get them through dietary supplements. Now, there's a very big difference there. And one is the FDA actively regulates foods, i.e. if there's something wrong there, they will come down very hard on a food company. It retroactively regulates the dietary supplement market because it doesn't have the budget to actually actively do it. So it's only if people start dying, like from ephedrine and those type of things, or they are inundated with complaints, then they will tell the company, oh, by the way, you can't do that. So essentially it's totally unregulated. So anyone could essentially put anything in a bottle and write anything they want on it and legally actually try and sell it. So if we sometimes look at probiotics that are sold in capsules, and generally I have never seen a situation where it was correct. Okay, so the food.
That's the beauty of
Yeah.
consuming a probiotic with a food product, especially a dairy product, because you're going to get the right strain in there, you're going to get it to grow and survive, it's going to be protected through the stomach and get to the small intestine where it needs to be and be able to colonize.
And
so
that's because of the research and because of regulation.
Correct, yeah. And so you have a much better opportunity of actually getting what's advertised through a food rather than
a dietary supplement.
And that's especially true in the area of probiotics.
Awesome. Now I'm still in that grocery store.
Yes.
What should I put in the cart?
Ooh, that's where it gets really tough.
And how do I find out more?
Yeah.
If we can't find out enough today, where does the consumer or the audience go?
Well, I was going to say that basically fermented dairy products.
Yeah. So
and
yogurt would be one of your first choices, or fermented milk products.
And what I always say is, well, you have basically a small intestine, which is a very long tube actually. It's over 20 feet long. And you have a large intestine, which is
a really, really long tube.
Actually, it's a shorter tube. It's about 68 feet, but it's a wider one.
Yeah.
And that essentially is two different environments. So for the small intestine, you target a lactobacillus. Okay, so generally a most common one here, and we know it's a pretty good one, is Lactobacillus acidophilus. There are different lactobacilli, that are different species that are advertised. And for the large intestine, we talk about bifidobacteria. So if you see something like acidophilus or lactobacillus, and then a bifidobacteria, that's basically 2 in 1 right there.
Now, there's not a guarantee that those are the right strains.
Correct.
We have all kinds of different strains of acidophilus and all kinds of different strains of bifidobacteria.
Yes.
Can our audience go to a website at your research institutes or your colleges? Is there something there?
Yeah, we have that kind of information available, but it'll be very hard to answer your question because you may not have information on your label what strain this actually is. Now, do we have companies at that point that have actually done clinical trials on some of their products that actually have data to show that their strain is the right strain?
Well, actually,
so we're just getting to that point now, and we're starting to evolve and have more of that information about what the exact right strain is, and is it in the product, and what level is it at to make sure it actually colonizes.
Well, keep doing the research because we certainly need help on that, and we're just about out of time today, doctors. If you've taught us anything, it's we've done research, there's some rights and wrongs, there's some good bacteria, there's some bad bacteria. Do your homework, think. Any last quick comments on that, Lloyd?
Again, it's just so critical to realize that all bacteria aren't bad. And we have good bacteria, and we need those to be at very high numbers in our body. And we want to consume dairy products that have these good bacteria in to make sure they're at a high level in our small and large intestine and will help to prevent disease.
Dan, last comments.
Yeah, we're only at the beginning of our knowledge on these probiotic cultures. There isn't enough strong clinical studies available to scientifically prove a lot of these things right now, because we're only beginning to actually look at these. If you look at it in Europe right now, it's a very controversial issue, since the European Food Safety Authority is now beginning to look at claims companies are making, and it has rejected every single one probiotic claim currently. So that will tell you the science is only at the beginning, but it has a bright future. Because we're beginning, if you look at the last decade, the amount of information that we have learned.
And the one thing that is clear is there are good bacteria, and if you have the right good bacteria, they'll outcompete the bad.
Correct.
The question that we need to figure out is which strains are the right ones, and how do we make sure we get them into the product and get them through our system. That's where the additional science needs to happen.
Sounds like we need you to continue that research. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Cool.
You think you know your farm better than anybody else? Think again. There's someone living on your farm who knows every inch, nook, and cranny. It's your trusty barn cat, keeping your buildings free of varmints and giving us plenty of fun times. The crew of our Arts and Heritage show, Off 90, put together this piece on the life of a barn cat.
I'm a barn cat, not an alley cat or a house cat. I don't sit in laps. I got a real job. I catch mice. It's a tough life. I'm a barn cat. Barn cat. Meow. This is my territory. Bowels, look out. I got sharp claws and a king-size bed made out of straw. I'm so glad I'm a barn cat. Yeah. Meow. This is my territory. Bowels, look out. I got sharp claws and a king-size bed made out of straw. I'm so glad I'm a barn cat. Yeah. I got a real job. It's a tough life. I'm a barn cat. Barn cat.
One of the ongoing themes with Farm Connections is FFA Youth Leadership. FFA is a time-proven organization dedicated to providing leadership and skills training for youth in agriculture. Like many in the ag industry, I'm very impressed with the young men and women who participate in this dynamic organization. So whenever possible, I try to connect with them, as I did at an event earlier this summer with FFA advisor Nate Thompson and 2 officers from the Hayfield FFA chapter. Why did you join FFA?
Well, the first reason I joined FFA is because it's kind of a family tradition to be in FFA. My dad and my brother and all my uncles and grandparents were in FFA, and just carrying on that tradition. And I wanted to pursue an agricultural career, so what better way to learn about agriculture than FFA?
Good choice. Katie, how about you? Why did you join?
My brother got me started in FFA. He's 3 years younger than me, and he started out in FFA by bringing a cow home from the fair he got for free. And so ever since then, we've both just been involved with FFA, trying to get involved in the community and everything.
And talking about community involvement, do you work on a farm near Hayfield?
Yeah, my farm, I work on a dairy farm outside of Hayfield. I milk cows for Bohonic Dairy.
How many hours a day?
I milk from 6 a.m. to anywhere from 10 or 1. In between there, I get off. So
Plus school?
plus school.
Some people aren't even up at 6 and you're already at work?
Yes.
You're a hard worker.
Thank you.
Do you work off the farm as well?
I just help my parents on the farm, baling and doing chores when needed. Yep, just kind of anything.
Why did you bring the FFA chapter down here today?
Well, I think it's important that the young men and women get out so that they can have an opportunity to develop their leadership skills, also have an opportunity to convey the message of the food and fiber system and how important it is and how much we take it for granted, every day. The millions of products that we consume and use that we don't even naturally think of as being an agricultural product.
We're well taken care of and maybe take it for granted, right?
That is correct.
KSMQ congratulates our FFA Student Leader of the Week, Region 8 Treasurer Jared Luhman of Goodhue.
I go to school here at Goodhue. I'm currently serving as the Goodhue FFA President and the Region 8 Secretary. My dad got me started actually. He was a past district officer. At first when I came here, I came from a small school, a class of only 3 people, so I really didn't know much about FFA. But once I got started, I realized that it was really an amazing opportunity for me. Growing up on a farm, I've always been involved in agriculture, and I feel that it's important to let others who have not had the opportunities that I've had to learn about agriculture and why it's so important. So I learned through my advisor that FFA is a great opportunity for me to get out there the importance of agriculture. Well, agriculture, as you know, feeds the entire world, but what's so incredible about it is that it's not only farming. It expands to things from forestry and farming, and then to the production of the materials. When you pick up a gallon of milk at the store, you don't think that it came from a farm. One thing that I've picked up through FFA is a hard work ethic. As a region officer, I've had to do countless things that is a lot of work, and it's taught me to be a better organized person, to put priorities first, and that's just something that I've definitely had a lot of learning experiences through. A personal goal of mine is to get as many people as I can personally reach a good understanding of agriculture in general.
We hope you gained something valuable from this episode of Farm Connections. Food for thought, a new perspective, or just a smile. Come back for more of the same next week on Farm Connections.